So, in the original, Kyle was with a woman in the beginning of the story. Now he's with women at the end. And more, Kyle is becoming a villain. Until, by the fifth telling of the story, he's out and out malicious, even criminal. That version, the fifth one, was the one told by our very own Tobin Lowe.
They are also getting a cat together. Let's call the cat Mr. Mistopheles from Cats the Musical, because as one does.
And I know this will sound biased because I work with him, but his version is really one of my favorites in this reverse Groundhog Day movie about Elliot and Kyle.
Cut to one of his friends in the middle of the night scrolling through TikTok, as one does, comes across a TikTok on their For You page.
In the story,
And it is this guy talking about how he catfishes people. His whole thing is that he pretends to be gay. He gets in these relationships. He's actually like a very religious conservative person. And so he's like catfishing these dudes to be in relationships with him. And it's all a sham. It's all a sham. And so then he goes into like, I recently did this to a guy. We got a cat together, Mr. Mistopheles. And then,
Love that name, Mr.
and then I like
Mistopheles.
took him for all he's worth. And actually, like, it was a really bad toxic relationship.
Did you hear what happened there? Basically, Tobin took these loose facts from Bobby and Lindsay's telling. The empty apartment, Kyle being straight, and very religious and conservative. And he combines all those things
into a catfishing scam artist who is not only doing that, but bragging about it on TikTok.
This is Alex again, the normal gossip producer.
Which seems to me like, honestly, this is the turn that makes the least logical sense to me. Sorry, Tobin. But like, if he's a scam artist, why would you be bragging about it? Then your scam is ruined. You know?
I hadn't even thought of that.
And it's funny because like Tobin has said multiple times, like he thought he was telling it perfectly.
I stand by what I said. I thought that I told it exactly as it was told to me.
This, of course, is my colleague Tobin Lowe. He deigned to consent to an interview for this story.
And if you had asked me afterwards, the only liberty I was very conscious of taking was changing the cat's name, which I thought was just fun and harmless.
To be fair, Bobby did use the word scam one time in his and Lindsay's telling of the story. But there was nothing about catfishing, and certainly no mention of multiple victims of same.
There's the bay.
Tobin ultimately heard the original version of the story, and I had to wonder what he thought about it.
I think I was surprised that they were happy at one point, or like they had a really good relationship.
Right.
I think that I would have assumed that that would survive in some way in the retellings. The original is just kind of sad, and then it becomes extraordinary in a way that, like, by the end, people's hurt is not the focus.
Yeah.
It's like sort of how wild people's actions are, and like you've sort of drifted far away from the original, smaller, more human hurt.
And he has a theory as to how they all collectively got there.
In retrospect, I think what happened is that everyone knew that there was this thing coming in the story where Kyle was going to leave Elliot, and that's sort of like all roads lead to this big moment in the story. And I think to some degree we were all like reverse engineering to that moment. Like, how do you explain the beats of what happened? How do you explain everyone's actions so that makes sense and lands really hard?
Right.
So that you recreate the same gasp that you had when you heard it.
Right. Right.
So that I can create that moment again.
Because in the original there is no explanation, and you're just kind of like, what the heck?
Yes.
And that's an uncomfortable feeling.
Right, exactly.
Just like it is in life. But of course, as Tobin had to remind me, the original story is life. That version wasn't part of the game. It really happened. Weirdly, there was only one more major change to the story after Tobin's version. When the comedian Brian Park tells it next, the guy in the TikTok video is not Kyle,
Brian Park.
but one of Kyle's many
know how that's a
unsuspecting victims,
coincidence?
warning other
Brian
TikTokers to
Park.
watch out for this predator.
Isn't that funny?
Which of course makes a lot more sense. Oh, and there's no mention of them getting a then the two versions after that are basically identical to Ryan's. It's like there were no more questions to be answered, no gaps in understanding. All of the reverse engineering Tobin talked about was complete, which makes you wonder if there's a natural end to a game like this. If you can only retell the story so many times before it plateaus, it stays static. I bet you that happens to urban myths too. Alex Sujong Laughlin says watching the story go through all of those changes was kind of thrilling. It was like seeing your own little monster come alive on the laboratory table. But by the last couple, 2-3 versions of the story, she had this other feeling as well.
It makes me feel sad.
Why?
It makes me think of the way that people become caricatures to each other. And it just feels like, you know, I don't know, not to be all like didactic and stuff, but we're talking the night before election day, and I've watched this play out for months, the way that people just get flattened into like, you know, conservative rednecks who hate everybody, or like radical feminazis who want to like kill babies. And it just like, it bums me out to see it happen so quickly, even in such a like low stakes story.
It's sort of like all of us are playing the game all the time.
Yeah, and like